Okay, so doing another video, and this one is about this article I ran across from Esquire. I think it was published last month, even though that date says July, but I think it was actually published in August. And this is a very interesting article about not the actual science of climate change, but the scientists of climate change, some of their experiences, and how dealing with the reality of climate change and knowing what they know affects them personally, and then how they interact with the public and all these sorts of issues. So it's actually a pretty interesting article. And one of the guys it kind of focuses on is this guy, Dr. Box, who was sort of a controversial figure in a sense, because he tweeted something about the potential for methane that's trapped at the Arctic to be released from the ice melting. And so this kind of got him in a certain amount of trouble. So it details this this scenario or this situation he found himself in. So it says, as a leading climatologist who spent many years studying the Arctic at the Bird, Polar, and Climate Research Center at Ohio State, Box knew that this breezy scientific detachment described one of the nightmare long-shot climate scenarios. A feedback loop where warming seas release methane that causes warming that releases more methane that causes more warming, and on until the planet is incompatible with human life. And he knew that there were similar methane releases occurring in the area. And so on impulse, he sent out a tweet. If even a small fraction of Arctic seafloor carbon is released to the atmosphere, we're fucked. So there was an immediate reaction to it. There were several headlines that went out. Climatologist says Arctic carbon release could mean we're fucked. So he got a lot of negative press, and from this, and there's a picture of him. But he also got a lot of negativity from, and this article sort of details it. They interview, and you can also hear the interview with the author of the article here. It's a good interview. So this sort of details these problems that guys like Gavin Schmidt had with, and there's a picture of Michael Mann. Guys like Gavin Schmidt had with what he was saying, because it presents we might as well not do anything because we're fucked. And these scientists, most of them, think that we can get out of the bad situation we're in, and what all the data that they're showing portends is not good. It looks like we're probably on the way to a 2-degree warmer world, with even if we shut everything down. That's where we're headed. It's already sort of baked in the cake, as they say. So they're not thrilled about what's going on, since we're not really doing a whole lot about it. Now, we have done some things, and that's pointed out in the article. We have done some things, but they're just so minor. We're still seeing steadily growing carbon emissions, and we're just increasing the level of carbon of CO2 in the atmosphere. And there are still, what is also talked about is the level of denial, and what these scientists have to deal with. Because of that, they are They have been demonized by many groups of people, mostly right-wing, politically concerned people. And the reason why, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly if I can. The reason why I think these people are motivated to just deny everything is because they just cannot accept the fact that the market isn't going to work. The market is not correcting this. The market is not designed to correct these types of problems. So just deny the problem exists, because you can't deny that the free market is problematic. And that's sort of their calling card. That's what they go by. That's their mainstay, is the market has to work and we need to free up the market. And well, there are externalities that aren't figured into market dynamics, and that's the unfortunate thing. There are costs. See, and I'm getting into this, but one of the basic things that is brought forth that makes free market economics so viable is what How von Mises, and I'm probably saying that wrong, how he combated the socialists, and this was back in, I don't know, the 30s, I think. Should probably look this stuff up before I do the video, but it's just coming into my head now. So the reason why he was successful in combating the socialists was because he brought forth the idea that, well, you can't, your system is not going to work, and this is very sloppy on my part, but your system is not going to work because it doesn't account, there's no way of accounting for prices of materials, and you're not going to have any way of controlling resources in that sense. But the problem with the type of traditional free market dynamics that we're used to is it does not take into consideration all of the costs of the workings of the market. So this is just an example. I mean, now we're talking huge scale costs when we have to deal with these problems, and we're going to have to deal with this, and we're already dealing with it. The article also points that out. So these externalities aren't taken into consideration up front in the market, and you could say, well, you have insurance companies and so on and so forth, but obviously everything isn't worked out, or otherwise we wouldn't be having this problem. There would be something that would combat these types of issues before they were a problem in the first place. But now we're going to have to spend a lot of money on mitigation. We're already seeing these problems with increased frequency of droughts, increased severity of droughts. The article talks about that also, how I've talked about this in previous video. The Arab Spring was brought about by the fact that there were serious droughts and there was food shortages, and that's why one thing leads to another, and we have a Syrian conflict now that looks very difficult politically. And how do you even deal with we're having a hard time dealing with this, because there's really no good side to pick in this, in what it has become. We're in big trouble there. There's nothing we can do about that, and we've got people fleeing the country, and it's a disaster. And this is partially, at least, most likely caused by, after a series of events, the reason why these protests came about was because of food shortages caused by severe drought. Now, this is just the beginning, of course. It's the proverbial tip of the iceberg. So we're going to see more and more of these sorts of events. We're going to see water shortages. The glaciers are melting, and that large populations depend upon for their fresh water. And you can see, just to point to a specific example, and probably the most prominent would be India. But we're already sort of seeing this. Play out in in small part at least, in California, where they are experiencing extreme drought, and snowpacks that they depended upon for fresh water are not there anymore. And so they're really struggling there, and people are being encouraged to not have a lawn anymore and things like that, because there's just not enough water. So, or at least not enough to sustain their agriculture, and that's just an enormous portion of their economy. And so we're already seeing these problems, but people still keep denying it. But the article talks about that. It talks about how there's to be a climate scientist and speak out, you have to kind of be careful about what you say, because then that's a picture of Gavin Schmidt, then you're labeled an alarmist. So I'm just going to read some things that he says about Dr. Jason Box. So I'll just take it up when he's talking about the glaciers. The glaciers are going to melt. They're all going to melt, he says. But my reaction to Jason Box's comments is, what is the point of saying that? It doesn't help anybody. So you can see he's sort of pissed off that he would come out and say something like that, because it's just it seems to indicate sort of a defeatist attitude, and stopping the inertia of this mad machine. And I'm just going to say, maybe I'll title the video this: we're out of control. We don't have control. We're on a train, and it's just going 200 miles an hour, and it's extremely difficult to get it to stop. If you try to stop it, if you just had a magical brake that could just instantly stop everything, you're going to kill everybody. So, and if you have a brake that works too well, and then take it back from there, there's a point where you can put the brakes on safely and be the most effective at stopping it. But that's still going to have a cost. And you can that illustration should tell you that there's sort of a gradient there, and we have to find out how to hit the right point on the gradient, so that we do the least amount of damage just stopping this train that we're on. But basically right now we're out of control. I mean, the inertia is just too strong and powerful, and that's why you're seeing all these denial campaigns and all this propaganda. You just cannot stop this machine. We're so dependent on fossil fuels. The current president's strategy is to try to sort of bridge our way over by using carbon-based hydrocarbons that are less damaging, that have less emissions in their process. So we're trying to switch from coal to natural gas, and then eventually over to the alternative energies like solar and wind. That's what we're slowly in the process of doing now. And that's why the EPA is getting tough on coal-powered plants, and it's going to be more difficult to add new coal-fired plants to our current system. So that's the direction we're going in, but you can see that it's a very, very slow pulling back on the brake lever, and it might be too slow. But it's because they know that if you pull back too hard, it's for one thing, it's extremely tough to pull on that lever, because you got people pulling the other way. No, let's make it go faster. That's kind of what's going on, really, is people are trying to make it go faster. Even people that are supposedly trying to pull back on the brake are really trying to make it go faster, because We've all sort of embraced this ridiculous idea that you can just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. You know, that's all you hear about. It's like, well, we got to have economic growth. You got to have economic growth. You got to have economic growth. Even in this article, the scientists are, I think it was Gavin Schmidt, and I apologize, I don't know where exactly that was. But there, if you read the article, there's a mention of how we can grow the economy with our current. We can grow the economy and have, you know, a decline in carbon emissions. That sort of is proposed by Schmidt, I believe. So even those guys that sort of recognize that we're on this out of control train are still trying to speed up the train by saying, well, you know, we can keep growing and keep growing and keep growing, and we can, you know, we can kind of have it both ways and grow the economy and have less emissions at the same time, however that works. So yeah, it's just, this is not going to be solved easily, because people don't really get the fundamentals of the problem. So that's just my view of it. And that's the problem when you have those sort of competing forces going on, and it points out, you know, how his family life is made a little bit difficult because of his sort of gloom and doom views. So I sort of thought it was kind of telling, though, that even Box and these other scientists have had children, and they talk about their children and stuff like that. Well, that tells me you must not really think it's going to be that bad. These guys are ultimately optimists, as they have decided that it's a good idea to have a kid, and the world will be okay. That's apparently what their mindset is. Or maybe they had the kid and then didn't realize until after they had the kid. But I think these are kind of young kids they have, so it's hard for me to accept that, but maybe that's what happened. But I don't think well, they mention another guy, McPherson, Dr. McPherson, who was an ecology professor at Arizona, might have been Arizona State, and if you look him up and look at some of his views, he's one of the guys that's talking about the methane problem in particular, and he has like the most dire predictions out there. I don't really buy into his scenario, but he thinks that the human race will be extinct within 20 to 30 years. At some point within, I believe he says at some point in the next decade or so, all this stuff is just really going to start ramping up, and we're gonna have some major problems. I think we'll start experiencing more and more problems, and by 2050 things will be kind of bad. That's what I think is going to happen. It was what it looks like to me. We're not going to be able to do enough to stop anything. I don't think the major stuff's going to come down the pike until probably after I'm gone. So I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to see the collapse of civilization or anything like that, but I certainly recognize it as a possibility, and I don't turn my nose up at it or anything and just scoff at the idea. I think there's a case to be made that yes, that could happen from many different vantage points, and one of them is climate change. Just because of the ramifications, and we've got a lot of unforeseen things that could happen as a result. And it might be that things start happening and people don't put the causal chain together and don't realize what's really going on. And what's really going on is we're putting strains on resources, and we're growing the population, and meanwhile the climate is changing and is exacerbating that situation. So it's rough, but so I recommend that you read this. I'll leave a link in the low bar, and maybe check out the interview also if you can. It's about a 19-20 minute interview. Okay, so that's it. And I hope this wasn't too doom and gloom for you, but we have to think about these things. So thanks for listening.